Welcome to episode 53 of the Search with Canada podcast, recorded on Friday, the 20th of March, 2020. My name is Mark Williams-Cook, and today we're joined by VP of SEO and Content at software marketplace G2, startup mentor, writer of the TechBound newsletter, and host of the TechBound Conversations podcast, Kevin Indig, and we're going to be talking about digital marketing during COVID-19.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. So I was just talking to Kevin before we started this recording, and I only just noticed actually Search with Canada is now a year old. So we've just passed this is our 53rd episode. So we've just passed the year, which is, I feel, another milestone for us that we've kept going. Kevin, your TechBound Conversations podcast, how long has that been going for?
Man, I've started a couple of months ago. I would say last year, September, I recorded the first episode. Then I waited until I had 5, and now, so I'd say it's like half a year now. And there's no kind of regular cadence when it comes out. It kind of more or less comes out when it comes out.
So what's your, for those that haven't heard of you, so again, Kevin is one of those people who I've been lucky enough to have contact with over the past probably couple of years. I've had conversations with him briefly on Twitter. He's a part of a technical SEO group that I contribute to regularly. Kevin, do you just want to give listeners that haven't heard of you a quick background of who you are, what you do?
Absolutely, and thanks for the kind words, Mark. So I'm currently, again, the VP of SEO and Content at G2. I was the head of SEO at Atlassian before, the makers of Jira, Confluence, and Trello. I've been out in the SEO space for about 10 years. Now I'm focused on topics beyond SEO. It's also lots of content marketing, some inbound channels. Man, I mean, I've been just out and about. I write on my personal site, kevin-indig.com, contribute to other sites. I think that's most you need to know about me. Otherwise, Google my name and you'll find something.
Yeah, I was just going to say you are in a lot of different places at once. You're one of those people who I kind of see you pop up, and I'm just like, how does this person have time to do this? So yeah, Kevin's not hard to find if you Google him. So today's episode, we may go slightly, I guess, outside the realms of what we'd normally talk about, because we're normally hyper focused on SEO and PPC, and I thought it would be good to do an episode around, still focused around search, but around digital marketing, while the country, the world is and businesses are dealing with the fallout with the results of coronavirus, of COVID. So personally, as most of our listeners will know, I run an agency and we do a lot of web and digital marketing work, and we've seen a whole range of impacts business wise. So the majority of businesses, as I'm sure everyone has seen, are facing some kind of struggle or hardship in terms of this. We've worked with some companies in training and event sectors who obviously have been completely shut down, which were followed by places like restaurants and cafes and clubs, again, who we deal with. And at the other end of the scale, we have actually got some e-commerce clients where, net, obviously this is a bad thing for everyone, but in terms of their business and online traffic, they have actually seen increases. And this is actually, Kevin, something you were saying. So with G2, you've actually seen some of your categories spiking, right? So you're actually getting more traffic.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I personally believe that we're at the very beginning of, I want to say, a new internet, or let's say the next step in the internet evolution. Might sound a bit bold, but the numbers that we're seeing on our marketplace for searches for software like video conferencing, audio conferencing, but also stuff like telemedicine, and VPNs, voice over IPs, those kind of conferences. It's absolutely stunning. E-notary, e-signature, webinar software. And I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? People are at home and you need to kind of keep business afloat as good as possible. But I believe that we're on the kind of verge to a kind of to the next step in an evolution, because now everybody thinks about how they can provide their services remotely. So of course, again, like doctors are in high demand, psychologists, counseling, but it's going to be very exciting to see what other industries are going to try to provide services online. And again, like I think fitness instructors, cooking teachers, tutors, online learning, those are also industries that are going to be absolutely blowing up, because not only are people at home and again try to entertain themselves and educate themselves, but they're also trying to make use of the time. So you have more time, you have more internet usage, and you have kind of the same demands that people had before. And I think that mix kind of is what we're seeing the very beginning of right now, and of course also at G2.
So that's really interesting when you talk about making that next leap, because that's, I think, something you see both in kind of business and nature, which is, these leaps are normally made when there is this external pressure that kind of forces these changes that would otherwise be, painful at the best of times. I think what's interesting there, obviously, as a software company, kind of software companies were always front of my mind for companies that might not be as badly affected as other types of business. There were ones that weren't. Well, it came a little bit as a surprise to me, but made perfect sense. So you mentioned about fitness instructors there. So I've got friends working in the kind of e-com sector for home fitness, and they said they're completely sold out of kettlebells, dumbbells, treadmills. So I assume everyone's going to come out of quarantine like really hench and in like the best condition of their life, or whether it's going to be people buy all this stuff and then we all just kind of devolve into eating Doritos on the sofa. I think it's worth mentioning. I'll mention it now. So obviously, I have unfortunately seen a lot of people get made redundant during this last week or so, and a lot of people working in marketing. I did put this out on my LinkedIn and Twitter. That's the only place I've put it at the moment. I am offering a free day of SEO training if you've been made redundant and you want to sort of learn SEO and kind of upskill. If you go to twitter.com/ my slightly embarrassing username, which is the Tapper Boy, which is TheTafferBoy, it's my pinned tweet. There's a little form there. Fill it in. I'll get in contact with you, and we'll sort out some video training. So, Kevin, my question for you then, which is probably on the front of many business owners' minds, if they haven't done much or they haven't done anything yet, what's the first things businesses should be doing now in this in this time?
Yeah. So the very first thing is to realize that people are in shock. This is a situation we've never seen before ever, and something that can be pretty disturbing for some people, right? Like it's a real distortion of reality. So people are in actual shock. So I do believe that there's a sort of kind of initial dip where business goes down tremendously. And I think that dip has probably started about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, and will continue depending on how quickly things change, right? So if from now on, I mean, I'm currently in Germany, you're in England. I assume that most listeners to this podcast live in a country that is kind of being shut down to the degree that people have to stay inside, except for emergencies and groceries. And like if we stay at this stage of containment and self quarantine, then I think people will kind of slowly recover from the shock, accept the new reality, and will be slightly more open towards business. If, for example, we see this taken even more extreme measures, or the situation gets more extreme, then that prolongs the shock. Now, first, that's kind of the first thing, right? Like businesses have to accept that. The second thing is businesses have to segment their customer base. I do believe that we're going to be in a recession, and I read a couple of articles and documents about marketing and business during recessions. And the first thing that you need to understand is that not maybe all your customer segments or customer groups might pull back their business or their money, right? So in essence, you have probably 3 to 4 different customer groups. There's one which is extremely affected by the recession or by the downturn, and you will lose those clients, right? Then there's another group that is slightly impacted but can still kind of get along and cope. Then there's a third group that is pretty wealthy and is not as affected. For them, it's business as usual. And then there's a fourth group that doesn't care about what's happening, right? They kind of live for today and not for tomorrow. And those will probably also retain as customers. And you have to ask yourself, which of those segments does my product appeal to most? And am I kind of a low cost or high cost solution? Right. So the classic kind of example that I came across was that kind of the luxury car salesman who now kind of gets a couple of cheaper cars, but by doing that, kind of kind of destroys his image with the luxury buyers who still have enough money. So first, again, like to kind of recap real quick, like first accept the people are or your customers might be in shock. So take a deep breath, like don't panic. The second thing is understand your customers very deeply and how their spending might be affected. And then third is to not make rapid changes to your business, but rather see how you can position yourself in that situation as either a partner or, again, as somebody who sells to people who are not affected by the situation anyway. And then you kind of focus on those.
I think that's some really good advice there. It was interesting you're saying about changing your business, because I've seen quite a few businesses adopt some pretty extreme strategies to still stay in contact with their client, with their customers, with their client base, or actually to still in some form provide their service. So I had here a tweet saved by a chap called Ryan Brooks, who just said, a bar in my neighborhood is delivering entire liters of their pre-mixed margaritas for $25, and you get a complimentary roll of toilet paper with your purchase. And it's really starting to feel like there are no rules anymore. And I really liked that. And there's lots of restaurants that have been delivering exactly what you said. I've seen yoga classes now being delivered online as well. What are your thoughts on what are some of the strategies that businesses can use to keep going at this time, if they're kind of direct, bread and butter, this is our business, that's really effective?
I think have at it. Do whatever you can do. Delivery, online customer acquisition, and also inventory. So what I mean by that is that I see a lot of, for example, offline retailers that sell fashion and clothes, and some of them are smart enough to take pictures of their inventory and then send that over via mail, right? So that is still a way to sell to your customers, but you have to, again, like bring your inventory online if you don't, and lots of small retailers and small businesses do not. And then communicate to them that you can deliver and still serve them in some way, whether that's curbside pickup or whether that's direct delivery or contactless direct delivery. And then third, make sure to be present online and tell people what's going on. I saw lots of gyms, stores, cafes, restaurants, bars who had absolutely no information about how their opening times were affected by COVID and what they were going to do moving forward. So I love the creativity that you see now. I also believe that this will have a lasting change on just delivery in general. And I think businesses should be creative. Honestly, I love that example of the margaritas and the toilet paper. Of course, it's a bit tongue in cheek. I don't think everybody has.
I almost feel like you're buying the toilet paper and the margaritas the free gift.
Hey, whatever works for you, man. But toilet paper crazy. Like this is just mind-boggling to me. But anyway, so yes, be creative. Think about what you can do. And this comes back to what I mentioned before. Don't panic and close down and be like, okay, this is it for me. But see what opportunities you have.
The communication there is actually something I think is really key. So this is something we were speaking to clients about, which is, we're now getting bombarded by obviously emails from here's what our owner director has to say about COVID-19. But I mean, we've been talking to people about actually on their websites, it's at the front of everyone's mind. So we work with some companies who are still providing their services and they've changed the way they do that. And we've been having conversations saying, look, you just need to have this at the forefront of your site. So when people, do get there, they can be reassured that you have thought about this. There is a procedure in place, because otherwise, if there's nothing on there about it, they're going to have all those second thoughts about, well, can they still do this? Is it safe? So by telling people we've thought about it, this is the plan, it's safe. Here's what's going on. We'll let you know. I think that instills a lot more confidence in people.
Yeah, and I think it can even burn your brand to a degree. Honestly, I'm really annoyed by all the this is how we handle COVID emails that just talk about what the business does for itself, but do not include what the businesses do for the customers, right? All these airlines, I booked a lot of flights this year because I was scheduled for a lot of conferences, and all I get back from a lot of these airlines is a video of their CEOs saying how concerned they are and how they take care of their employees. And that's important, of course. But hey, I want to know, like, can I get a refund? Like, what are you going to do about the flights? Are you still flying? So I feel like there's a lot of kind of like shallow information that just annoys people, but doesn't give them the information that they're really looking for, what they're really, like what they're really caring about. So I do hope that businesses start to realize that and stop sending these kind of empty emails that are just clogging our inboxes.
I had a conversation with someone about this yesterday, actually, because they were saying, what do we do as marketers? Because if we use COVID-19 or we talk about that, then we're profiteering from it. And if we don't mention it, we're callous and not thoughtful. And the conversation I had with them was, you know, don't think of it in terms of marketing. Do what's right and what you can do to help people, and you're already doing that job, because I think people will remember the brands that have been good to them after this. This is a real crunch time. Like I've seen lots of people talk about flights and talk about companies that were really helpful to them and, were communicative and gave them refunds and got them sorted, and other companies and other brands that have just been, dug their heels in for whatever reason. And I think people are going to have a long memory about those brands after this.
Oh, 100%. I certainly will. I again also booked a lot of
Don't name
hotels,
any
and
names.
no, no, no. I was just gonna say, like, I'm not gonna name who did what, but there was one very big, good hotel chain that immediately refunded my money. No problem, sir. What can we do for you? Is everything fine? There was another chain, where they're not receptive to anything at all, and that, as you said, people will remember that. And if you want to burn your brand right now, there's a good opportunity to do so. At the same time, what I recommend for most businesses is, first of all, position yourself as a partner, right? Like give people the sense that we're all in this together, which we actually are, and that you're doing your best to take care of the customers first, right? So anyway, I'm just getting worked out about this whole topic, but some companies really haven't understood what's going on.
So, our listeners as well, I've got something concrete in the show notes. I'm going to put a link to an article that was put together, I think it was a couple of years ago now, and it's a really good piece that argues essentially cutting budgets in marketing hurts more than it protects businesses. It's obviously a generalization, and you need to look at each case individually. It's got a lot of evidence to support those claims, though, from the UK's Institute of Practitioners in Advertising. So it's a credible study. And a quote that stands out is that it's better to maintain a share of voice during a downturn, and the longer term improvement in profitability is likely to greatly outweigh the short term reduction. And it goes into this in quite a lot of detail with examples. And I found it a really nice thing to share with our clients, just so they can start thinking about that and maybe not have the knee-jerk reaction, as Kevin said, of kind of just curling up and climbing up, which is most likely, going to be more damaging in the long term. And obviously, if you've got cash flow problems, if you don't have cash, you don't have cash. But it's not wouldn't be necessarily my first thing to cut. That article is actually republished by an agency called Fountain Partnership. And the other thing I want to mention is, and I'll put a link to this as well in the show notes, Fountain Partnership are conducting a very large survey of agencies that is talking about how clients are reacting to COVID-19. So are they spending more, the same, less on marketing? Are they pausing it? And that's at fountainpartnership.co.uk/agency survey. So if you do run an agency, go there, fill that out. They're going to publish and share the results with everyone. So it's going to be really interesting and kind of help everyone see what everyone's doing and what's going on. Because I think a lot of the downturn is because of not necessarily what's happening, but the uncertainty of what's coming and how long it's going to be for. So information like that, I think, can help everyone ride it out. So, Kevin, do you have any specifics in terms of SEO and PPC? Because I've heard people saying about how they've actually managed to improve things by things like switching around when they've noticed changes in searcher intent. So they've sort of changed page titles to include things like online, because they saw a shift in search behavior. We've certainly spoken to brands about how they're changing PPC and SEO strategies. What would be your sort of thoughts on how companies might approach that if they're doing SEO and PPC at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, we are usually when we go into a crisis like that or into recession, then what we're seeing are two opposing forces. On the one hand, we have kind of the notion, or not the notion, but kind of the best practice to cut the Fed as quickly as possible to go through a recession. And when I mean cut the Fed, I mean cut unnecessary budget and spend, because it has shown in the last couple of recessions and economic crises that the companies that make bigger cuts earlier on have a higher likelihood to survive. On the other hand, we have the importance of brand and marketing. So at the same time, statistics and case studies and research papers show that brands that cut marketing spend too drastically also had a higher likelihood of going under, of not making it through the recession or the crisis. So what it comes down to is, first of all, you want to cut the Fed. You want to cut all that's unnecessary kind of keywords that are not performing well on Google Ads, investments in SEO that have a high risk and low chance of succeeding. And you want to kind of return to a place of efficiency and hopefully profitability. So, by the way, one of the outcomes of those case studies was also that companies that don't have a year of runway might be potentially at risk. Now, that's a very long time, right? But I just wanted to bring that up to put it into perspective. Now, SEO, I think, has a very good chance of not being cut because it's a very cheap channel and it's a very important channel because you already have your customer base or potential customers who have an intent, who are looking for something, and you might fulfill that need. So you don't need to create market demand or market stimulus. On the other hand, I also see good times for Google Ads. And I mean, like Facebook, sure, pretty much most online advertising that is performance driven. And that's because part of the Fed is all the stuff that you can measure reliably. Part of that is, like our TV brand campaigns, or maybe even display and whatever is not easy to measure. So I think, Facebook ads, Google ads, good times ahead because you can cut down what doesn't work well, and you know exactly what you get for your spend. So, for example, in 2009, towards the end of the last recession, there was an article by New York Times that showed that the spend on Google Ads increased by 14%. It was the first quarter of 2009, so in the midst of the last recession, and it just showed that people, or better said, companies, revert back to channels that they can control better. Now, what I also see for the SEO side is that, first of all, your search volumes might fluctuate heavily, and that's simply because people might search more. Certain verticals might get way less searches, like events, offline entertainment, travel, tourism, and that might kind of change the search landscape tremendously, right? So first of all, like, look at your search volume and look at how it changes, and then also perform keyword search more often. Because you want to see what other keywords slowly gain traction, what other trends are emerging, based on that kind of new situation that we're in and based on changing consumer behavior. And then lastly, I think for SEO, what I see coming also is that paid links will become a bigger topic. And that's simply because smaller publishers and blogs um, might sell more of what they have, right? And a backlink is something that you can get money for relatively quickly. And that's due to a higher pressure to monetize your project or your site. So I think that's something that we're seeing as well. And in the midst of that, I also think that relationships are going to become more important when it comes to content partnerships or to link exchanges, link swaps, those kind of things. So that's what I see for SEO and PPC right now.
That's really interesting. I think that reflects a lot of the conversations certainly that we've had with clients over the last week. So to broadly break it down to two categories, we deal with a fair amount of clients that I would say are lead generation, in that they do SEO and they do PPC, and the aim of that is to get people to contact them to buy their services. Now, those people generally have been quite badly affected in terms of coronavirus, in terms of they had cancellations and they have less people converting. So the general approach we've taken with those clients has been, as you've said, with the performance channels like PPC, to scale back on everything apart from the highest performing key phrases. So we're not doing as much kind of exploration, like you say, or brand. And actually, what we've done, some of those clients have, I think, quite wisely, actually increased their investment in SEO because they're now in a situation where some of their staff obviously aren't as busy as they used to be because they don't have the same volume of calls. But we're actually in the situation that's probably quite rare for people that are consulting on an SEO, which is we have some clients actually saying, well, we actually have spare capacity to do all that content stuff on the site that you said was going to be really great, but we've just been too busy to do up until now. So we've actually managed to get clients to actually redeploy some of their staff, and then working on doing all the things that kind of everyone knows that are important but maybe not urgent sometimes on a site, about improving the content, and actually focusing on SEO and seeing if we can start to get some momentum for in 6 months plus, when everything is going to come back or start to come back around, we hope, and they're there to capitalize on that. And the same actually with, we've been discussing even e-com clients, so people that are 100% digital based and people who have physical locations as well, what they can do with staff and the restrictions that are in place. So a bit like we saw earlier with margaritas and toilet paper, we've had conversations with people, say with showrooms, doing virtual tour, like live tours of their showrooms and taking questions about products that can then be ordered and delivered through the site. And again, they've looked at redeploying staff. And we've actually, as you have there in some e-commerce sites, we've actually seen the search traffic going up. So for some things, again, I didn't really expect. So even things like kind of home garden stuff, I think some people are like, well, I'm going to be inside for a while, so I want to make it as nice as possible. So have you got, we're kind of coming to the end. We're already at half an hour. This is going really quick, Kevin. Have you got any kind of closing advice you could give people as a takeaway for business owners or for in-house marketers, something that they can hold on to and think about as we go over the next few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, know your customers, know what's going on in the world, and kind of be as lenient as you can with them. And one thing that I would suggest or invite businesses to do is to not necessarily go for the hard conversion, but for the soft conversion. What I mean by that is that people in shock are probably going to be very reluctant to make important or big decisions, and they might be quickly annoyed by any sort of outreach or direct marketing that you're doing. So instead, try to see, if you can get them to do a soft buy-in or a soft conversion in the realms of, imagine you send your customers an email and you're like, hey, like, do you want us to pause communication for a couple of weeks, or do you want to continue? Yeah, right. So you kind of let the customers decide. And the same goes, for example, for backlink outreach. So you could say something like, hey, say you do cold outreach, and you write something like, hey, like, we're interested in a backlink from a site, blah blah, the common stuff. would it be okay if I follow up in a couple of weeks instead of for you to make this decision right now? So this way, if they come back to you and say, yeah, sure, follow up in a couple of weeks, it's just not like the right time, or I don't have the headspace for it, then customers can show a bit of interest, but don't have to make the decision right now. And I see the same for sales, for example, right? So instead of like approaching people and be like, okay, like, do you want to sign right now, or what's up? Try an approach of saying, hey, like, I know this is a hard time. I know things are uncertain. Would you be okay to postpone this for a week or two? And I think the likelihood and the chance of then eventually closing the deal or selling the product is much, much higher than pressuring people in this time of uncertainty to close a deal. And I think as businesses, we need to be creative in how we provide that kind of soft buy-in or soft conversion opportunity to our clients and customers.
I think that's brilliant advice, Kevin. The other thing I'd throw in at the end of that is, when I really like the point you've made, and I hadn't actually thought about it in this way, that people are in this kind of longer state of shock because this is completely uncharted territory for people as well as businesses. The other thing I think I've appreciated brands doing is that just to realize that a lot of people, as you said, are having to be at home, social distance, having to isolate, which is a big change for the majority of people. And there are a lot of people who are legitimately going to be, bored and anxious a lot more than usual. So I've seen, brands doing stuff that is kind of a little bit maybe off-brand, a bit more human, a bit more fun, just to relieve that. And I've seen a lot of people respond very positively to that. So as Kevin says, if you can get creative in either of those ways, I think that's going to serve you well over the coming months. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Mark, thank you as well. It was a great conversation. I'm glad to be on.
So the Search with Canada podcast will be back in 1 week's time on Monday, the 30th of March. You can get the transcription of this episode with all of the links to everything we've talked about, all of the resources. And actually, there's one other thing I did want to mention at the tail end of this, which is Dom Hodgson, very, very lovely chap that's spoken at Search Norwich before, has started a website which is searchstarterpack.com, and he's pulled together a load of software providers and other services that are offering free or massively extended trials of their software to help kind of startup and young and small companies that are struggling at the moment, kind of with costs and keeping running. So it's searchstarterpack.com. So do check that out as well. But all of the other resources, including that one, will be on our show notes, which will be at search.withcanada.co.uk. And apart from that, I hope everyone stays safe and that you'll listen again in a week's time.